And Paul, take it away.
Sure. Thanks, Julie. Great to be back. And you'll stop recording after the presentation, so the discussion won't be. So feel free to participate afterwards, everyone, without being captured on tape. But yeah, great to be back. Great to see all these familiar and new faces. I'm Paul McPherron. I'm a professor in English and former director of ACERT. So it's exciting to present another lunchtime seminar today. But my job really is just to present to moderate the discussion. Austin is our talent today, and going to talk about his work on ungrading. But I just wanted to, actually, I'll share my screen real quick just to mention that this is not a new topic to ACERT, and is not a new topic to have Austin come to talk at ACERT. So we did talk about ungrading a couple semesters ago when we were in person, and this was a write-up, and I'll put the links in the chat. But it's a topic I think we've been hearing about and discussing for a couple years now, really. But I think with the pandemic, it's become particularly relevant to think about how we grade, why we grade, and finding those spaces where we may remove the grade, at least the teacher-centered grading. And I think Austin's going to really bring out that perspective today. So just to click on a couple other resources that I'll put in the chat, Jesse Stommel, who I know Austin also reads a lot about, has written about this for years. So there's a couple different posts if you follow his blog about ungrading. And Susan Bloom, here it is. Susan Bloom has written about it for quite a while. And in fact, she has an edited book that came out in the fall that I got, which is this ungrading book, which has another Hunter instructor, or former Hunter instructor, Christina Katapodis, has a chapter in it with Kathy Davidson. So I really recommend as an entry into this discussion, these blogs or this book. And I'll also put this this really nice blog post from a BMCC instructor. I think some of the discussion is around 4-year, 2-year, and where it could work, where it can't work, the backgrounds of the students. So it's good to read a little bit about the different ways and places people are implementing the idea of ungrading. So with that, I just want to introduce Austin. Like I said, he's a CERT All-Star. He's presented for us before, and he's back again to give us updates on his ungrading practices and even some research he's done into it. He's a PhD candidate in English at the Graduate Center. He has taught American literature and composition courses here at Hunter before. He also teaches at the New Jersey City University, has taught at the College of Staten Island, and has been a WAC fellow at Bronx Community College, as well as a WAC coordinator now at Lehman. So thank you for coming back, Austin, and take it away.
Thank you. Finally, someone refers to me as the talent. I've been waiting for that for a very long time. Hi, so I'm really, thank you so much, and thanks for inviting me to talk to you today. I love ACERT, and in fact, going to some ACERT stuff, some ACERT meetings when I was kind of getting my master's and then going into the PhD program really got me excited about thinking about innovative pedagogy. So it's, and Hunter is my home base. I've been there for a long time, so it's really, I'm happy to. I got joyous when Paul asked me to do this. So I just want to. Ungrading is, as you may or may not know, is kind of taking on more interest now, and there's a lot of iterations of what it can look like, not only in terms of discipline, but also in terms of approach, methodology. So I'm going to just kind of give a brief overview of some of the conceptual, the kind of a conceptual framework of ungrading and some of the kind of philosophical ideas that underpin it. And then I'll sort of give you some examples of how I do it and some of the stuff that has come out of it for me. I've found the practice to be transformative in a lot of ways. It has fundamentally altered my relationship with my students and the way that I teach. But I also want to stress the fact that there are reasonable skepticisms about it, and there's also it doesn't have to be sort of absolute in the way that you think about it. There's a lot of different ways that you can kind of implement ungrading in not whole, not maybe not in totality for even a whole semester, but for individual assignments and things like that. So let me just pull up, make sure I can screen share. So let me know, and Paul, I'll try and be good on time, but please let me know if I'm going too long. I have this is my, I'm somewhere in between like a Luddite and Elon Musk, so I you know, these are the kind of graphics you're going to get. So you know, ungrading sort of starts with this question of, you know, is there an issue with grades? It sort of steps back and takes a look at grading itself, which is very naturalized within academia and within education in general, and so it's sort of reflexive and not really questioned as a practice. This is an article I'll link up in the chat. It's this offers some research, a kind of some, I found it to be in terms of sort of empirical data and research, kind of something that gives you a kind of foundation to start thinking about this. It's called an article called "Teaching More by Grading Less or Differently" by Jeffrey Shinsky and Kimberly Tanner. So here are some of the things that they assert in the article. Grades often, and these quotes are taken from the article and I'll link it up. Grades often only create the facade of coherence, serving primarily institutional rather than pedagogical purposes. This comes out of, at the beginning of the article, they historicize grades and sort of look at the fact that they don't really come into practice the way that we understand them. It's fully until about the 1940s. So it's important to begin to historicize and to sort of think about these as contingent. Grades trounce feedback. Students are less likely to pay attention and incorporate suggestions in future work when a grade is attached. They tend to focus on the grade rather than the content of the feedback. Grades often dampen existing intrinsic motivation, give rise to extrinsic motivation, enhance fear of failure, reduce interest, decrease enjoyment of classwork, and heighten competitiveness. This is sort of one of the fundamental sort of issues that ungrading attempts to address, which is this notion of extrinsic motivation. I think, you know, like all dichotomies, it can be reductive. You know, in thinking about this, I've kind of come to the conclusion that there's no such thing as purely extrinsic or purely intrinsic motivation, but there is a kind of a continuum. And I think that what grades do quite, and all of us are quite, or not really metacognitive or conscious of what they do, but they really do play to this sense of your motivation in education becomes the grade itself, and not, or more so, the grade itself, and not the content that you're trying to learn, or even for me, I think of things. Ungrading has led me to think of education even as less focused on sort of like knowledge as a telos, and really as education as a process. Grades, we know them. Grades as we know them have only come into being as recently as the 1940s. I mentioned that. So Shinsky and Tanner do conclude, they sort of say in this, on our overview, this is a kind of a bleak assessment, but of grades when we look at the history of them and some of the what some of the data show about them. But there's a lot of ways that we can begin to ease up on grades and to sort of tweak the way that we approach them. So there's a lot of opportunities to kind of remedy some of these situations. This is from Jesse Stommel. Paul mentioned an essay by him. There's another one that I want to link that I actually give to my students, and it comes from it's from a blog that he wrote too as well. Jesse Stommel's also featured in that anthology from the University of West Virginia that Paul linked up. Grades and institutional rankings are currently for a capitalist system that reduces teaching and learning to a mere transaction. Grading is a massive coordinated effort to take humans out of the educational process. And so part of what I like about Stommel's approach is it focuses on ungrading not only as a kind of anti-racist pedagogy, as a pedagogy that promotes equity, but also one that is critical of the way in which sort of the corporatization of the university has pushed a kind of transactionalism with the way that grades function. So ungrading as a practice sort of emphasizes some of these things. Embodied learning, wherein subject position matters, which this is a fascinating, one of the transformative aspects of it for me has been the fact that when I have students turn in the work that they turn in, they submit it with a self-evaluation where they answer a couple of basic questions that I've asked them to answer. And then after they do this self-evaluation, they pose a tentative course grade for themselves up to that point that's holistic. So we're still dealing with the letter grade on some level, but it's been it's been shrunken down or so de-emphasized. But we still, and this is something we can talk about, we still obviously have to deal with the letter grade. But what's interesting about this, the way in which it transforms student-teacher relations, in my view, is that it puts students, it foregrounds student subjectivity in a way that is simply not happening without this kind of reflective, metacognitive, student first kind of process. And it makes me sort of think about their work according to how the students self-position. And along with this, it emphasizes dialogical education and evaluation through mutual accountability. This is a sort of something that Stommel talks about, is that, it is inherently intersubjective. So it makes students accountable, but it makes teachers accountable as well for the kind of feedback that they give students. Student-directed learning outcomes. I have, for any class I teach, I have the generic course outcomes, but then what I tell students is those are abstractions. And what I want you to do is in your thinking about I have them write a goal prospectus, which I'll share with you, but in thinking about their own goals, they interpret the course objectives according to relative to what their own needs and interests are. So it concretizes course objectives in that sense. Responsive and flexible teaching. But by nature, in doing this, you're changing sort of how sort of the teacher-student dynamic or relations work, de-hierarchizing it, and sort of that also means emphasizing processual learning and responsive learning, concepts that I'm sure we're all familiar with. It also promotes anti-racist pedagogy. This is something that I think is currently I'm doing some research on with the comp coordinator at NJCU. We're doing an article on ungrading as anti-racist pedagogy. We're sort of making the argument based on some student data from last semester that when we talk about anti-racist pedagogy, we should not just be talking about content in the classroom, but we should be talking about the structure of the classroom. And this becomes like really, this became for us really important during coronavirus. I was ungrading before coronavirus, but all of a sudden it took on a certain urgency when that happened. And my reaction to it was to say, it's really great that during the coronavirus, teachers are thinking more about how to be kinder to students, how to trust students, how to work with students, how to be flexible with students, thinking about like the embodiment of the classroom in ways that we hadn't, which is ironic because we're sort of disembodied screens. But why do we have to do that when there's a global pandemic? Like, why can't we do that, without those constraints? I think that, a lot of, especially the kind of students that we're teaching at CUNY, are students who are, even before coronavirus, are dealing with 5 classes a semester, family issues, issues with funding first generation students, et cetera, and so forth. So, and I don't want to go on too much, but the one thing this relates to this other point here, what Kathy Davidson refers to as a deficit model of education, and emphasizing trusting students rather than suspecting them. It's the starting point with ungrading is trust, that you invest a level of trust in the students, that they are capable of taking control of their own education and caring about their own education. And we don't need the grades to sort of deputize ourselves in sort of making them learn. So the last point I'll make is this really kind of, and Kathy Davidson draws this connection in her book on the new education, which I do recommend checking out. She talks about how this is really borrowing from the community college model in a lot of ways. And we have sort of in education, if you think about the extremes in university education, there's community college on one end and there's Ivy League on the other. And they kind of represent opposite paradigms of where education might go, because the community college model begins with meeting students where they're at, and the Ivy League model is based on hierarchizing them through competition. So ungrading is really playing into this idea of trying to meet students where they're at. There's another quote by Stommel: grades do motivate, but they don't motivate the kinds of peak experiences that can happen in a learning environment. Something like have an epiphany, communicate original thought, sit uncomfortably with your not knowing, or build something that's never been built before can't be motivated by a grade. So that's, let me, how am I doing on time, Paul? Am I okay?
Yeah, I think 5 or 10 more minutes, and then we can open it up.
Oh, okay, great.
Does that work?
Yeah, I didn't want to eat up too much time. So the last thing, I'll show you a couple of things to make this more concrete. So one thing that I do, so this is a kind of a template version, and I can share this with everyone if you want it. I include this in my, let me make sure everyone can see this. This is a little small, so I'm gonna try and make this bigger. This is sort of like whether I'm teaching, I've taught, survey of American literature type, like, English major type courses, but I also regularly teach composition and developmental composition. So I use this sort of for all the classes. It goes on the syllabus, and it gives a kind of overview of some of the stuff I just talked about with you. I offer links to students to look at these. This is the one Paul mentioned. I think I have the other Stommel one here. And I sort of try and break the ice with talking about this a little bit. Anticipating questions like, how does grading work? Doesn't Hunter require grades? Don't I deserve to know how I'm doing? One thing I am aware of is that, where ungrading or gradeless classrooms have been enacted has primarily been in very privileged educational settings. So so it's important to think about, with grades, the whole idea of valuing knowledge for knowledge's sake is a very privileged sort of stance to take. And I don't think I'm not sort of forcing that on students or grade shaming them. Like you shouldn't care about grades. You should only care about knowledge. It's not about that. So there is ways to do this where you're responsive to the population that you're teaching, and you're aware of the fact that for them, knowing how they're doing is really important. It has material, significance. So I go over some of this stuff, the goal prospectus, how this works. Basically, structurally, they come up with the goal prospectus at the beginning of the semester. It's a very short, like 2-paragraph reflection on what they would like to accomplish for the semester based on their interests. And then at the midterm stage, they turn in a self-evaluation with whatever assignments they've turned in up to that point. And I'll show you the prompt for that, but I ask them a series of questions. Basically, it's about a page or a page and a half where they just reflect on how they think they've done over the semester, what some of their goals are, and they propose a tentative course grade at the end of that. And then I look at that first before I look at any of their written work. And I use that as a lens through which to view the work that they're submitting to me. And then I let them know how I feel about their grade proposal. Then they do that one more time at the end of the semester, propose a final course grade for themselves, but they also look back on the semester and reflect on what the work they've done, and then think about what they want to do going forward. So it's this version of ungrading is a holistic approach that eschews quantitative evaluation. There are ways to do it more quantitatively, but I'm a Bergsonian, so I wanted pure qualitative reality. So this is the prompt for the self-evaluation, and I can link this up if you want to take a look at it. But it involves a lot of sort of, I'm interested in narrative, like tell me a story about who you are as a student. So I've been interested in how narrative can be a form of reflection, or prompt a form of reflection or a form of thinking. Most students say they've never encountered anything like this. midterm self-evaluation looks like this. Midterm, these are examples. I can upload these of students who, I think I shared this anonymously, but they gave me the permission to share the examples of what their evaluations look like. One last thing I'll show you is with my composition students last semester, I had them do, paired with the ungrading, I had them do a grading autobiography, where the first assignment that writing assignment they did was to write about their history of being graded. And so this can relate to kind of, I think you can do cool things with this, like link it up to sort of multimodal type assignments. So I had them take, I'm gonna, please forgive me, but I'm going to share my Twitter with you, but I promise you, it's just one little section. You won't be seeing my, we all know about Twitter. Okay, so let me pull this up. So what I did was I had students, if they wanted to, I gave them the option not to, or to do it anonymously, but most of them really wanted to do this. Share excerpts from their autobiography, the grading autobiography, and with the link Ungrading, so that they could actually communicate some of their ideas about the university and about really a lot of K through 12. I mean, these are students coming out of high school, so some of their experiences. I asked them to reflect on their experiences and invite them to share excerpts. And I mentioned Stommel here, that he prompts some of this. You know, I can share the link here, but they have these really great excerpts, like grade, like the almighty dollar in the real world are the economic currency of the educational world. They are incentive to work hard and get you wherever you want, so long as you keep working for them. Like money, grades can be deceitful, they can be finessed. Today's world is very competitive. It's so competitive, college is a must. Without college, it must be very hard for anyone to find a good job. Getting a good grade requires hard work in college. So they, you know, all kinds of ideas. The grades don't determine our intelligence status. I believe that grades do open doors, but they also give us a label. What was fascinating about this assignment was to see how across all of these essays, there was so many connective threads. I mean, students were talking about the mental toll that grades took on them or their friends. But also they understood, they talked about sort of the inherently kind of the racist structuring or hierarchizing of grades, that it sort of separated people often along racial lines. Even sometimes separating family members, though, you know, like based on your grades, one brother goes to this school and another brother goes to another school. So they understood sort of very intuitively that grades have this kind of, you know, sorting function and hierarchizing function, and that the schools that you go to based on your grades are going to determine the type of educational opportunities that you have. So it was really fascinating to sort of read that, and also to hear students say that they had never thought of grades as anything other than just absolutely necessary. And so once they started thinking about, you know, questioning why do we have them, they became much more critical of them. I think I'll stop there. I don't want to go too long, but those are some of that's sort of my approach. And like I said, I can link up some of those materials if you want to see the way it works on my syllabus and the way I approach it. But other people do different things. Like Paul mentioned Christina, who is a friend of mine and is a grad center student, and she has taught at Hunter. We've actually kind of collaborated. We've co-taught classes before. And Christina does a contract grading approach because she does a contract syllabus approach. So, you know, her version is going to look a lot different. And someone like Asao Inouye, if you know him from the, is it the 3 C's or the 4 C's? It's the 4 C's, right? I always forget how many C's there are. From the 10 C's now. He has a great book on contract grading as a form of anti-racist pedagogy. So this can take a lot of forms. I'm personally into the qualitative approach, but that's just me.
Thanks, Austin. Round of applause for Austin.